My brothers and sisters, we've just heard an accounting of the history of God's plan for you and me, the history of our salvation. And for a few minutes, I'd like to invite you to revisit the very first reading. Right after creation, right after we were told that God made us in his image and likeness, male and female, he created us. Our Jewish foreparent felt that it was necessary to explain how we who were made in God's image and likeness came to be so different from our God. So you notice in the book of Genesis, at the very beginning, there are two creation stories. One story about our making, and then another story about what we did once God made us. That second story comes to its fullness in chapter 3. I never tire of telling the story of Adam and Eve, because the story of Adam and Eve is a seminal story of humankind. The story of Adam and Eve is our story. It's about you and me. Now, for those of us who are older, we were taught that Adam and Eve were the cause of sin entering into our world. That it was because of them that we have to face all the sufferings we have to face, the ultimate suffering being death. But if you look at that story more closely, that yes, Adam and Eve sinned. We don't deny that. And we sin. We surely can't deny that. But if we look more closely, this is what the story says to me. That while Adam and Eve sinned, they were born into a world that was already broken. Think about it. Those of us who were trained Baltimore Catechism days, Adam and Eve were the ones who caused all this bad stuff to happen to us. But it can't be true, because sin was already present in the garden. The devil was already there. So yes, they sinned, but they sinned, I believe, not only because they were selfish and prideful and thought that they could be God. They sinned, I believe, because they were broken. They were born into a broken world, and they responded like broken people, like you and me. So the Adam and Eve story tells us that even though God made us in his image and likeness, there is something about you and me that makes it difficult for us to live that truth, for us to live as he created us. And I like to, as I just said, call it brokenness, things that have happened to us that makes it impossible for us to live as he created us to live. And sin, things that we do that makes it impossible for us to live as he created us to live. We delude ourselves into believing that we can live as we want to live, to our own destruction. That's our story, but only part of it. Only part of it. our God is constant in his love for us. And Adam and Eve came to know who God was after they sinned. They came to know who God was after they turned their backs on him. The end of chapter 3 of the book of Genesis ends so beautifully. It ends with these words. As Adam and Eve were preparing to leave the garden, as they were going out into the world to face all the trials and tribulations of the world, the author writes that God sewed garments for them so they would not go into the world naked. God's love for us is constant. They turned their backs on God. God could not turn his back on them. We turn our backs on God. God will never turn his back on us. He refuses to allow us to be naked without his love. In the beautiful singing of the Exultet that Claire shared with us this evening, there is a line, and I've used it before, and I just love this line. Oh, happy fault. Oh, happy fault. Oh, necessary sin of Adam that brought for us so great and glorious a Redeemer. That God took our sinfulness and used it to bring the Savior into the world. He flipped it. We rejected him. He says, okay, you reject me, I'm going to send you my son. See how he'll do. Well, we showed him, didn't we? Yeah, his son was on that cross. But then he showed us. His son came down from the cross and said to you and me, our brokenness, our sinfulness is no obstacle for our God's love. His love for us is greater than our ability to be broken and our need to sin. That's what we celebrate. His love is greater than our brokenness. His love is greater than our sinfulness. He will not allow us to go into this world naked. His son came, lived, died, rose from the dead to say to us, that's who our God is, and this is what he wants for us.